Welcome to Sew with Monty. Today we're going to work on making a basic sleeve block to go with our torso so that we have the complete package. And I want to take you through the steps to do this. They're really quite easy and it's kind of fun to do. And I have a little measurement chart here that you can refer to. I'll post it on the end of the video so that you can see it. And it tells you the standard measurements for 4 to 14 lady size. Now, if you're making this for someone and you don't really know what size they are, or this is not about sizing, you can take the measurements yourself. And the way you want to take them is you want to take your bicep measurement, which is number E here, with the arm down to the side and 1 inch below the armpit. And then add 1.5 inches, anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches ease, depending on how large the size is. So the fuller the figure, the more you're going to add. But you need ease in here, so up to 1.5 inches will work on your bicep. And then for your sleeve length, you want to have them put their hand on their thigh with a slight bend in their arm, and you go from the shoulder bone at the tip of your shoulder, across your elbow, and down to the base of your wrist right here. So that's going to give you your sleeve length. And then the last measurement is your wrist measurement. Now you don't take your wrist measurement up here. You take it around your hand and through your thumb knuckle right here. This circumference right here. Reason being, you want to be able to get your hand through the wrist opening. So that would be the 3 measurements you would take on a person if you were doing this for someone. Now the missing measurements are our back armhole measurement and our front armhole measurement. I'm working with a size 8, so I'm going to put my measurements in these 2 blank spots right here. So let me show you how you get those measurements. We'll start with the back, and this has no seam allowance on it, so we're going to measure the very edge of this pattern, and we're going to write it right on the pattern. That way we don't have to do it but once, and we'll always have that measurement here in case we ever need it again. So I take a flexible ruler, and I start at the base of the armhole, and I hold it around the curve. Release it as you go so that you can keep it accurate, and come all the way up to the shoulder. And mine is 9 inches, so my back armhole is 9 inches. I'm going to put it here, and I'm also going to write it, the back armhole measurement, right here on my chart so that I know I have that as well. And then we're going to do the front measurement. And the same way, we're going to start at the base here, put a little weight there to hold it down, and I'm going to go around the armhole and get to a certain point, release, and come back. So this is 8 3/8. So that's very common that the front armhole will be slightly smaller than the back armhole. Now let's talk about armholes, because if the armhole isn't right, the sleeve's not going to be right. And I want to show you things to look for in the armhole. First of all, you would like the 2 armholes to either equal each other or the back to be slightly longer, like mine is. Mine's 5/8 of an inch longer, and that's pretty good. You wouldn't want it 2 inches longer. That would be too much. But anywhere from 1 inch to 1/4 inch longer or equal to is good. So I'm putting the base of my armhole here, the underarm, together because I want a smooth transition between the back and the front. I don't want it to dip into a point or peak into a point here, or any other odd configuration that might make it difficult to get the sleeve to fit. So you want to check for a nice smooth transition at the base of the armhole, and then you want to put your shoulders together, making sure that they match in length, and that you also have a nice smooth transition here. See how smooth that is? That's going to give me a better fitting armhole because these areas are nice and smooth. And you also want to check to make sure that the roundness of your armhole, so if I put this here, you want to visualize this part right here, that it's round enough, if you can visualize an arm being in here, that it's not going to come over and get flat and knife you in the front of your armpit, or be too scooped out here and cause reach problems if you're trying to put a sleeve in. So that's basically it for the armhole. Let's get set up and I'll show you how to make the sleeve. Alright, so now we're ready to draft our sleeve. And the first thing we're going to do is our sleeve length, right here. So my sleeve length for 8 is 23 inches long. So right in the middle of my paper, I'm going to draw a line 23 inches long. Now this line will serve to split this sleeve right in half. And I'm going to put a little T mark at the top and bottom so that I know that that's my length. And then across the bottom edge here, I'm going to do the wrist measurement. So my wrist measurement is 8 1/4. So I'm going to center 8 1/4 right here, which is 4 1/8 on each side of my rule. And you want to make sure that you keep this very square. You want your line to be perfectly square here. And if it's not, it could mess up your sleeve. So take your time to get it perfectly square and make sure you're even on both sides. I always like to double check myself. 4 1/8, 4 1/8. So there's my wrist opening, my wrist measurement. Now, the next part of this is we're going to build the cap height. Now, because this is still a working sleeve, it's not quite finessed yet, we're going to, by default, do the cap height at 6 inches. Now, you can, a lot of people do it different measurements, but I like to just go to 6 because I know the sleeve's going to need adjusting. I'm planning on it. So I'm just going to go with an even 6 because it's an even number to work with as I start developing this sleeve. At this point right here, this is my bicep level line. So I'm going to look at my bicep measurement for size 8. It's 13 1/4. So I want to split 13 1/4 in half, which would be, let's see, 6 1/2 plus 6 5/8. So I'm going to go 6 5/8 right across through here, making sure again that I'm nice and straight. Now I'm working on a grid board, which is helping me keep myself straight. So I'm going to align my lines up to my grid so that I can see that I'm square. If you don't have that, you can use a square to keep you squared off. And then I'm going to go 13, which is 6 1/2, and another quarter, which is 13 1/4. So there's my measurement. Now I'm 6 5/8 right here. I just like to double check myself to make sure. See, 6 5/8. That way I know I'm balanced on both sides. It's always good to check, even if you know the measurements. Now, once we have the two crosses here and the vertical line here, which will end up being our grain line, we're going to connect the dots. So we're going to make a kite. So we're going to come up here, and we're going to come here and connect this dot right at the very top. And then we're going to come over here and connect this dot so that we'll have 5 lines here. And you can start kind of seeing the sleeve develop. See, now we're starting to see the sleeve. Now this section right here is the cap height. That's the 6 inches by default that we used. The rest of this is the sleeve. This would be your underarm point right here, and this is your wrist measurement. So in this section right here, the 6-inch section, I'm going to divide it into 4 spaces. So I'm going to come down 1.5 inches and make a little mark, another 1.5 inches and make a mark, 1.5 inches. That way I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And then I'm going to stay parallel to my bicep level line, and I'm going to draw lines connecting this angled line to this angled line. And I'm going to do that 2 more times, 1.5 inches. This is why you want to use the 6. It's nice and easy to do the math. Doesn't really matter because you're going to end up adjusting it most likely anyway. And if you don't, well then you're lucky. So now we have this divided into 4 sections. Now the next part of this is we're going to build fences or use our measurements to make plot marks that we can connect with our curve and make the top of our sleeve and the underarm dip. So this first top line right here, we're going to square off. Now it's very important that you pay attention to this. You're going to be square to the angled lines. But this is my point. That's the only thing these lines are doing is giving me my point. So I'm going to come in here, and from this point I'm going to stay square to the angled line, and I'm going to draw a 3/4 inch line with a little T mark on the end. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, staying square to this line. It's really important that you stay square to your angled lines. 3/4 of an inch up and make a little T. The T is very helpful when you start blending the curves so you can actually see it. So 3/4, 3/4. At this point, we're going to go 1/4 on both sides. So I'm going to come up 1/4, and I'm going to come up 1/4 here. Again, make sure you stay square to your angled line. Just like that. See? Now we have to decide which side of the sleeve is going to be the back and which side is going to be the front. So if my pattern, the back is over here and the front is over here, I'm going to make this the back and this the front, because there's a difference now in how we're going to do this. So after you've got it marked back and front, you're going to go in the front, and on this last line here, this one, you're going to go in 1/2 inch. So instead of coming out, you're going to draw the line inward 1/2 inch, just like that. Now on the back, you're only going to come in 1/4 inch. Now all your marks are made, and we're going to take a vary curve and we're going to blend these off. If you have a French curve, that will work too, but this really does require some sort of curve. So if you don't have one, this might be a time to run to the store and invest in one. Now I'm using a vary curve. You can use a French curve as well. But what we're going to do is we want to take the curve and turn it upward and inward here. So I want the tight part of my curve to go up and in toward the cap of my sleeve. I'm going to connect this dot, and the very top of my sleeve. And I'm only going to draw the line when I've moved my curve and I can see all three of those are connected at the same time. And I'm not going to draw it unless I see all three of those lines are connected. See? And then I'm going to reflect it and do the same thing. Tight part of the curve toward the top of the sleeve. And I'm going to connect these three. And I'm not drawing it until I see that all three of those are connected. See? Very nice top. Now for this section, I want to take my curve and I'm going to go down and out. So I'm turning the curve over and I'm going to go down. So the tight part of the curve is going to go down and out. So I'm going to connect this point, and this point. And this is the front of my sleeve. So I want to move my curve until I can see all three of those points connected at the same time. Just like that. See how pretty that works out? Going to do the same over here, down and out. Tight part of the curve goes out toward the armpit. And I'm going to connect this point, and this point. So I just keep moving my vary curve until I can see all three of those points connected at the same time. And then just draw it in. That's the sleeve. Very simple, huh? So let me cut it out and then I'll take you to the next step. So now we have a beautiful sleeve, but does it fit our armhole? That's the next thing we need to find out. So we're going to walk the armhole to the sleeve and see how much ease is left over. In the sleeve cap, we would like at least 3/4 to 1.25 inch ease. Now if you get, the bigger the size, the more ease you need in the top of the sleeve. But you definitely need ease, and the reason being, your arm from your shoulder point down is round. And if you don't have enough ease in the sleeve cap so that the sleeve puffs out just slightly, it'll be tight across the girth of your arm, and you won't be able to raise your arm or reach forward. So you definitely need ease. Smaller the size, the less ease you need. So a minimum of 3/4 inch up to, I'd say a max of 1.5 inches. For most sizes. So I'm going to take my front and I'm going to start at the armpit right here, the underarm point, and I'm going to lay them together and I'm going to hold the very edge. Now I'm going to put a little weight over here just to hold this down, but I want to hold the very edge of my pattern, and I'm going to walk this front along the arm hole here in the sleeve cap, and I'm going to hold it right on the edge and just pivot it so that the two edges keep aligning. Now as I go along, I can mark my notch just to save some time, and that way I know I have it. And then wherever the pattern starts to go away from the arm pattern, the sleeve pattern, I'm going to just pivot it back on so that it stays on the edge. And just take your time. Be accurate. Don't go fast. It's not necessary to go fast here. Wherever I come to, I'm going to mark it like this, and I'm going to put a little F on it. That tells me that the front walked to this point right here. So now I'm going to do the back the same way. So I'm going to turn it over this way. I'll put my weight over here so it doesn't get in the way. And I'm going to start at the base of the armhole, like this, and I'm going to hold it right on the edge and gently pivot the armhole so that it aligns back with the sleeve. And I'm going to keep doing this all the way around it until I get to the shoulder. And when I get to the shoulder, I'm going to make a mark to see how much ease I have on the back side. So this is my back right here. Now the space in here is what I have now for ease. So let's measure and see what it is. And see if we're going to leave it or if we're going to take a little bit out. So right now it's 1.5 inches. That is it within the margin of keeping, but I'm going to take a 1/2 inch out just so I can show you how to do it. I could leave it. And if I left it, I would just find the center of this ease, 1.5 inches, so it would be 3/4. And I'd put a little mark here, and that would end up being my shoulder notch. But just so I can show you how to adjust this, I'm going to make it slightly smaller. So let's take out 1/4 inch, just a little bit, just to show you. So we'll leave 1.25 inch ease in there. So the first part of this is, I'm going to slice it right down the middle of my sleeve cap. And then I'm going to open up the bicep line right here. And I'm going to try to leave a little hinge out here so that it doesn't get away from me, so that it's still attached. See? Just very delicately attached. And then I'm going to do the same over here. Now, if let's say this was too small, that my sleeve cap was too small for my sleeve, I'll show you what you would do. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to anchor these 2 points right here, because I don't want my sleeve to buckle while I'm working on the sleeve cap. So let me move that down just slightly so you can see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scissor these 2 over and make a little mark here, because I'm only taking out 1/4 inch. So I'm going to make a mark right there. I'm going to make this edge meet that edge and lower them both equally at the same time. I don't want to lower one more than the other. It'll make my sleeve cap lopsided. So when I get this low enough, and just bring it up a little tiny bit, making sure that these 2 are lined up here and those 2 are touching, I would tape this down, and then I would find center of my ease again, which now needs to be adjusted because it's smaller, and that would become my new shoulder notch. And that's what we're going to do. But before we do that, let's say I had to add to it. Like I wanted to add 1/4 in here. So if I were adding 1/4, I would raise these 2 up equally, just like this, until I had 1/4 inch between here. And I would have another piece of paper underneath, and I would tape it down and then trace and cut it off with the paper underneath, filling in all the cracks. So that's how you would add. But in our case, we're going to take a little bit out. So I'm going to go back down, trying to do this equally on both sides. And once I have it like this, I'm just going to put a weight on it and get my tape, and we're going to tape it down. Now because I walked, when I was walking my sleeve with my armhole, I marked my notches. See, I've got my single notch here, and underneath my weight, I have my double notch for the back. So I've already got all my notches put in. All I have to do is put my shoulder seam notch in, and my sleeve is done. So I'm just going to tape it all down, and I'm going to draw little horseshoes around my notches so that they're very apparent. And my sleeve is completely done. I'll just mark it and be ready to cut it out. So right here, it's 1.25 inches, so I'm going to come over 5/8, and this is going to be my shoulder seam notch. And I want to put a horseshoe around it because there's so many little marks here. I want to horseshoe my notches so that I know where my notches actually are. So this is my sleeve. I'm just going to put cut to sleeve. And I'm just going to put on here no seam allowance, because there's no seam allowance on my block, and I don't want to forget and cut it out thinking there is. So now we have a sleeve. We have our front and back torso. So we can sew this into the muslin, and I can show you what it looks like. So we have our lovely sleeve set into our torso muslin, and it looks really great. I'm real happy with it. I want to show you some things that you need to look for once you get your sleeve sewn in. First of all, you want it to be very smooth here. You don't want to see any drag lines, such as the sleeve cap being too short. See how if the sleeve cap is short, it doesn't take much to make the sleeve wing way out. Or the opposite, if it's too long, you end up with little smile lines in here. So you've got to be careful about this length. And that's why I kind of like the 6. It sort of keeps you in a medium range that you can develop the right height for your sleeve cap. The second thing I'm looking for is, if I hold the sleeve like this and I turn it up, I want to see this seam roughly in the middle of my sleeve. Now, that's a little bit forward, but this is real important. You don't want your seam to be way over here or way over there. So if it's just hanging straight like this and you pick it up, you want to see it roughly in the middle, somewhere in this area right here. The reason this would be this way is because the sleeve from the sleeve cap down, from the bicep down, is even, it's balanced. Same in the front, same in the back, and that'll keep your sleeve in the middle, the seam in the middle. The next thing I want to do is I want to look at my sleeve, and I want to see that my sleeve is splitting my side seam. See how it's balanced on the side seam? It's not rotating forward or backward, and that's a really good sign that your sleeve is balanced and in the right place. So those are the things you want to look for in your sleeve after you sew it up, and it makes a really nice finish. Now we have a whole muslin with a sleeve in it that we can do many, many things with. And that's it. Basic sleeve.